For almost 3 years, my lemon tree looked perfect and produced absolutely nothing. No lemons. No flowers. Not even a single tiny bud. Honestly, it drove me crazy. I planted the tree thinking citrus would be simple. Give it sunlight, water it regularly, feed it once in a while, and eventually I'd have fresh lemons growing right in my backyard. That's what every gardening article seemed to promise, and at first, everything looked great. The leaves were deep green. The branches kept getting longer every season. Friends would come over, look at the tree, and say things like, "Wow, that thing looks super healthy." But every spring told a different story. I'd walk outside expecting flowers and see nothing except more leaves. At first, I thought the tree just needed time. Then I assumed I wasn't feeding it enough. So I started doing what most people do when a plant struggles. I tried helping more. I watered more often, added stronger fertilizer, bought expensive citrus food, even transplanted the tree into a larger container because I thought maybe the roots needed more space. And somehow, the tree got worse. Not unhealthy worse, deceptively worse. It became bigger, greener, leafier, and somehow even less interested in producing fruit. It looked like the healthiest lemon tree imaginable, except for one tiny problem. It refused to act like a lemon tree. I remember standing outside one afternoon staring at it thinking, how can something look this alive and still do absolutely nothing? That's when I almost gave up, but a random conversation changed everything. One weekend I visited a local plant nursery and started talking to an older citrus grower from Central California. This guy had been growing citrus commercially for decades. I explained the whole situation, showed him pictures of my tree, and expected some complicated answer involving rare nutrients or expensive products. Instead, he smiled and said something that sounded completely ridiculous. Stop watering it so much. That was it. No secret chemical. No miracle fertilizer. Just less water. At first I honestly thought he was joking. Why would stressing a fruit tree help it produce more fruit? Wouldn't that just make the tree weaker? But he explained something most gardeners never realize. Lemon trees don't produce flowers because conditions are perfect. They produce flowers because they think they need to reproduce, and suddenly everything started making sense. For years, I had accidentally made my tree too comfortable. Constant water, constant feeding, constant growth. The tree had zero reason to focus on reproduction because, biologically, it believed resources would always be unlimited. Instead of producing flowers, it kept investing energy into leaves, shoots, and expansion. Basically, I had trained my lemon tree to become a leaf factory. So I decided to try his advice. I stopped watering completely for almost 2 weeks. Honestly, the first few days felt wrong. Every gardening instinct told me I was killing the plant. But I watched carefully. The leaves stayed firm at first, then eventually showed a very slight droop. Not severe stress. Just enough for the tree to notice. Then I deeply watered the soil again. And what happened next honestly shocked me. About a month later, tiny flower buds started appearing across the branches. At first I thought I was imagining it, but within weeks, the tree exploded with blossoms. The smell alone was unbelievable. My entire backyard smelled like citrus flowers. Bees were everywhere. Branches that had done nothing for years suddenly looked alive in a completely different way. That one lesson completely changed how I understood lemon trees. And once I started learning more, I realized most people make the exact same mistakes I did. The biggest problem is usually too much nitrogen. Most fertilizers marketed for green growth are packed with nitrogen because nitrogen makes plants grow fast. It creates lush leaves, thick stems, and rapid expansion. That sounds great until you realize something important. Nitrogen mainly encourages vegetation, not fruit. So when gardeners constantly feed citrus with high nitrogen fertilizer, the tree keeps focusing on growing bigger instead of flowering. The result? A beautiful tree with no lemons. If your citrus tree looks dark green, extremely leafy, and grows aggressively every season but never blooms, there's a good chance you're overfeeding nitrogen. Once I reduced nitrogen and switched to a more balanced citrus fertilizer with better potassium support, things improved even more. Because potassium affects the plant differently. Instead of forcing leaf growth, potassium helps support flowering, energy movement, and fruit development. It basically tells the tree to stop endlessly expanding and start preparing to reproduce. and the difference can happen surprisingly fast, but fertilizer is only part of the story. The second huge mistake is constant watering. This one surprises almost everyone. People assume fruit trees should always stay moist because dry soil sounds dangerous. But in nature, citrus trees evolved with changing conditions. Dry periods followed by rain are completely normal. That mild stress becomes a biological signal. When the tree senses temporary drought, it begins shifting priorities internally. Instead of wasting energy on endless growth, it starts preparing for survival and reproduction. That's why controlled water stress works so well. Not extreme drought. Not damaging the plant. Just a short period where the soil dries slightly before deep watering again. That contrast often triggers heavy blooming. And honestly, it still feels backwards even after seeing it work myself. Another thing most people ignore is sunlight. Lemon trees are obsessed with sunlight, not bright room sunlight. Real direct sunlight. 6 to 8 hours minimum. And if the canopy becomes too dense, inner branches stop receiving enough light to support flowering. The tree may still look full from the outside, but inside it becomes crowded and inefficient. That's why light pruning matters so much. Not aggressive cutting, not hacking the tree apart, just opening the canopy enough for sunlight and airflow to reach more branches. Once I started lightly thinning crowded growth, flower production improved again. Then I discovered another strange trick commercial growers use. Branch bending. This sounded fake the first time I heard about it, but apparently fast vertical branches stay focused on growth. They naturally prioritize getting taller instead of producing fruit. However, when you gently bend certain shoots sideways, hormone flow inside the branch changes, and suddenly those same branches become more likely to flower. It's honestly fascinating how sensitive trees are to tiny physical changes. You're not forcing fruit manually, you're changing the signals the tree receives. That's really the secret behind everything. Every action tells the tree something. Too much water says, keep growing. Too much nitrogen says, make more leaves. Too much shade says, energy is limited. But controlled stress, sunlight, balanced nutrients, and proper pruning send a completely different message. It's time to reproduce. And once your lemon tree finally gets that message, the transformation feels unbelievable. The following spring, my tree looked completely different. Flowers covered almost every branch. Small lemons started forming everywhere. For the first time ever, the tree actually looked like a citrus tree instead of just an oversized bush. Even neighbors started asking what I was doing differently. And honestly, the funniest part is that the answer was surprisingly simple. I stopped trying to help so much because sometimes the reason a lemon tree refuses to fruit isn't neglect. It's too much comfort. And once you understand that, growing lemons becomes a whole different game.